Hello everyone, thank you for your massive support on the last Gojo vs JoJo video. I did read every comment, even the super long ones. To address a few concerns, the first video is definitely more of a proof of concept than a usual power scaling video, so the scaling is a bit messy. I still agree with how I explained things at the time, but I'd like to elaborate better on how fights would go, and explain that some fights have a chance to go either way. With that said, the real video starts here. The rules are as follows. The fights are to the death, characters are bloodlusted, and for speed, we will consider Gojo faster than light. Someone who is even faster in this video only really applies to one character, so it doesn't really matter too much. Speed feats in Jujutsu Kaisen are very inconsistent, and there are some faster than light characters and beyond within JoJo's bizarre adventure, so it wouldn't overly favor Gojo. Obviously manga spoilers for both, as the biggest fights are needed to explain how strong each character is, and for now, no data books. Just statements and feats from the manga for the sake of consistency. Last video I said I will just allow for stands to see and interact with Jujutsu sorcery, and vice versa. The reason this is important is you need cursed energy to defeat cursed energy within the universe of Jujutsu Kaisen. This is more or less the same as when it comes to stands. As in this video, I will refer to curses, shikigami, and stands as equivalents, given that they have a similar makeup, though their origin differs. Comes to outside of this video, I do not consider them that alike. Gojo is a special grade sorcerer. This means he is considered one of the strongest sorcerers affiliated to Jujutsu Society. And when it comes to special grade sorcerers, there's only 3. Gojo's innate technique is called Limitless. This allows him to bring the concept of infinity into reality. This ability is called Infinity. This Gojo has a field of cursed energy that is like curses in that blocks both the physical and metaphysical. Initially, the model we are given for this is the Achilles and the Tortoise paradox. However, this is wrong. See this pointed out in an argument Gege has with a mathematician in a volume extra segment. Infinity is better described as the dichotomy paradox, which is as follows. Lanta is going to point A, but before she can go to point A, she must get halfway there, and then a quarter, and then ad infinitum. The way to visualize this is the mathematical concept being asymptotic towards 0. Similarly to this, there is a simulated infinite divisional set of points between Gojo and everything else, as he is constantly using infinity as a spiritual barrier. The reason why I need to give a set of examples of how this works instead of just saying it's infinite and calling it a day is that infinity is only mostly infinite. The reason things are able to touch infinity is due to manual adjustments by Gojo himself. It's the automatic version of his ability to text attacks without Gojo's input. Tensions exist though, as infinity is not really infinite. A character with a power that is actually infinite would be able to beat him. Secondly, Gojo cannot defend against abilities that originate within infinity, so if someone can find a way to do that, like teleporting inside of him, they could beat him. Okay, I know that's already a lot, but there's going to be quite a bit more here. You'd think Gojo would be super vulnerable without infinity, but there's an issue with that. He can reinforce his bond with cursed energy. Combined with his 6 eyes, this allows him to use almost max output all the time at barely any cost at all. With this, he can more or less be tanking attacks that are destroying entire cities. And the attack that defeated him is enough to basically kill anyone in this video, assuming that it was right, of course. I know this is sort of a power scaling video, so we're breaking up the calculations. Sukuna has 20 fingers, and a single cursed spirit imbued with a finger is considered a special grade curse. When we are first introduced to special grade curses, it is stated cluster bombs might be enough. This is just an example, as human weapons do not work on curses. Now I'll put that into scale for you. The cluster bombs I am using for this model are the Russian AO-1SCH, one of these containing 150 submunitions, each being 200 grams, leaving us with an ordnance worth 3 kilos of high explosive, which is usually TNT. That is only one cluster bomb. These are actually dropped in volleys of 250 to 275, so we pop 250 and 275, it's 3 kilos, which leaves us with 750 to 825 kilos of TNT. 750 through 825 kilos of TNT turns into around 3 gigajoules. Gigajoules and gigawatts are 1-to-1 conversions. We confidently say a volley of these would produce around 3 nuclear power plants worth of energy for 3 years. This is where the math really starts for Sukuna. He would be at least 20x that, and even if we're saying one cluster bomb volley is enough to defeat one special grade curse, due with 62 through 69 gigajoules. This leaves us with the math for if Sukuna was a curse, she is not. See, time and time again, the difference between a special grade sorcerer and a grade 1 sorcerer is huge, and special grade curses are on par if not below a grade 1 sorcerer. When it comes down to putting a number on the difference between special grade curses and sorcerers, it's at minimum another 100x, I'm going to argue it's closer to 1000x. Enough with Sukuna math, let's see why Gojo stacks up with this. With the help of Gaku Ganji's guitar music, a full incantation and dance, Root Utahime is able to fulfill her innate technique's ritual condition, called Solo Forbidden Area, and now at full power, increasing her abilities by a further 120%, this being a buff to herself, Gojo, and Ijichi. Meanwhile, Gojo is meeting his full ritual condition, and with the help of Utahime, can now release a 200% Hollow Purple, a blast of imaginary energy that nearly wipes out an entire city. Last but not least, Ijichi summons a barrier technique that obscures this, so dodging would need to be done at the last possible moment, if at all. This 200% Hollow Purple Gojo is used at the start of the fight in this battle flattens every building in the distance between reaching Sukuna. The distance between where Gojo is in Shibuya and where Sukuna is being hit in Shinjuku is around 4.5 kilometers. This is an attack that Sukuna blocks with his hands, though he takes a good amount of damage. Gojo is at least on par with the 20-finger Sukuna with the 10 shadows, and it would be unreasonable to say that Sukuna was able to kill a near full health Gojo with less than anything around a small nuke. This might seem insane, but we do have very high scaling when it comes to special grades. In my previous video we have another special grade sorcerer, Yuki Tsukumo, who created an actual black hole that would have destroyed the planet. So, all things considered, I think it's at least plausible that a Hollow Purple is around 62 through 69 terajoules, if you plug in the numbers from earlier. With that 200% Hollow Purple, Gojo's in the same ballpark as Fat Man, which was around 80 terajoules for reference. I already covered Gojo's other abilities in my last video, but there are a few things I didn't mention. The 6 eyes allow Gojo to accurately guess what other people's abilities are, so when it comes to characters he can perceive safely, he would likely be able to accurately guess their abilities. Finally, we're on to the JoJo villains. Some of my personal favorite characters within JoJo. Dio Brando versus Gojo. So, this is akin to a coughing baby versus a nuclear bomb. In the case of Gojo, literally, Gojo wins. Ultimate Cars versus Gojo. This one has a lot more to it. Cars is a pillarman, the progenitor of vampires in the JoJo world. Even for those blessed with their unique physiology, Cars stands above them all. In his climactic fight against Joseph, Cars demonstrates many powerful and unique abilities. These abilities include being able to change any part of him into animal parts, and Cars can handle being pushed into a volcano, initially taking damage, but he has the capacity to adapt his body given the time. Lastly, his best feat is being shot into space by a volcano and surviving in space. This is great and all, but Gojo would block any offense Cars can muster, as well as Gojo can use blue to send Cars into space. And even if you think he can't, a character that gets damaged by lava gets absolutely trounced by Hollow Purple. A real reason we know this for certain is while fighting Sukuna, who's around as strong as Gojo is already, Sukuna is able to summon Maharaga, who is able to adapt to any and all phenomena given 5 hits by it. Not only does Maharaga have the ability to adapt, but he's also able to pierce infinity, and even damage Gojo. Cars just can't even compare to this, but theoretically given the time, he could probably beat Gojo, but when it comes to Gojo, he's hitting you with infinity, he's hitting you with Hollow Purple, he's hitting you with everything, and Cars just would not have the time to do such a thing. Dio versus Gojo is a lot more complicated than meets the eye. Dio's stand stops time for up to 10 seconds before his death. A key misconception may be made with the statement as follows. With Dio's infinite potential, life duration, and the infinite potential of the world, somehow Dio is practically a god of potential. This may seem irrelevant, but when it comes to Gojo, he also has infinite potential for growth. When faced with a near-death experience against Toji, Gojo gains the ability of Reverse Curse technique, which is key to unlocking the ability a bit later to keep up infinity passively with no downtime, as well as the ability to use infinity at all times. And something that may sound similar to Requiem in a way, Gojo's experience of nearly dying the second his infinity ran out. He manifests the ability to prevent this again. The difference here is when it comes to adapting to anything he's faced, Gojo has Dio beat. Similarly to how Sukuna was able to adapt to infinity, Gojo's evolution when it comes to infinity that allows him to use infinity without any breaks is the kind of breakthrough that Dio would need to win for certain, like being able to disable someone's ability without touching them. The reason Dio loses is here. Infinity would still function without Gojo's input. Abilities are shown to stay active when it comes to their stands and attacks whilst time stop is active, and they would need to vanish or otherwise be dispelled, as infinity requires that level of negation to cease defending Gojo. Let's be fair on Dio here, there are a lot of things holding him back. As in a situation like Sukuna while possessing Yuji, Dio uses a body that is not his own, and it also happens to be the main protagonist of his part that he first appeared in. Weakened by borrowing a body, Dio still crushes his enemies, giving him little proper training when it comes to the short year he even had with the stand. With the world being unable to pummel Gojo, his time stomp would eventually end. This gives Gojo the time to expand his domain, repair his burnt out curse technique, and obliterate Gojo with a maximum output hollow purple. The last thing here to address is the idea that Dio has infinite or immeasurable speed. This is simply not true. Dio may be moving in a time stomp, but the things he interacts with temporarily unfreeze, and he would need to be slowing down time by moving so fast that time appears to freeze. Yoshikage Kira versus Gojo. Let's start off with Kira's stand, Killer Queen. Possesses 3 abilities. All 3 of them are variations of the ability to create bombs. The only power we'll be talking on at length here is going to be Bites the Dust, as the other ones require contact. To put it simply, you cannot touch Satoru Gojo without him wanting you to. Bites the Dust is the ability Killer Queen manifests after being struck by the stand arrow for the second time. This is different than the Requiem arrow, as it only gives him a new ability and does not evolve his stand more than that. It works like this. A bomb is implanted in the target. If the target tells anyone about Kira, it traps them in a death loop. Gojo would never give Kira the prep time to do this, but I'll show you how this works, as if Gojo was Rohan in the chapters we learned of Bites the Dust. We see Rohan Kishibe killed by Hayato accidentally with BTS, removing him from the loop at that time. This scenario changes depending on how events play out on the part of the person initially targeted by BTS, as the decisions you make still change how the death loop plays out. Gojo would still need someone to break him out of the death loop. As we see with Josuke and company meeting Hayato, Kira is not immune to exposing his own identity, and this would be all Gojo needs to defeat Kira. BTS is required for Hayato to say in one way or form. We see this in how Rohan is able to just look into his brain, and that is enough to activate Bites the Dust, killing them both. Essentially, Gojo would never ever give Kira the time to talk to another person, have another person say words, have those words blow him up. Within the story, we already see that Kira is not able to survive the permutations of the 1 hour of time that it sends you back after you die from Bites the Dust. The entire idea of it being a death loop prevents him from actually making proper use of it, as anyone given an hour would be able to tell Gojo in one way or another they need to kill Yoshikage Kira, as even a child was able to do it. The last trick up Kira's sleeve here is his expert use of Stray Cat. Stray Cat is a post-mortem stand that shoots invisible bubbles, and it just conveniently happened to be carried by Hayato in a situation that he was able to break the death loop. Snatching away Stray Cat after having practiced with it already after some time, Kira is able to implant his bombs into these bubbles. Unfortunately for Kira, Gojo already has a precedent for blocking invisible things, as Sukuna slashes are invisible, and Infinity has no real difficulty with blocking them. So, in the end, Kira may win the drip contest. When it comes to the actual fight, Gojo slams. Diavolo versus Gojo is not really close. Diavolo's stand, King Crimson, has 2 abilities, Time Erasure and Epitaph. Time Erasure could be used to dodge almost every attack Gojo has. When it comes down to it, he cannot hit Gojo. Racing Time allows the user to move freely while everyone else is milling around minding their business. Similar to Stopping Time, everyone else experiences it as if they just flipped 10 seconds forward. This doesn't really work on Gojo for 2 reasons. Even if you thought this would bypass Infinity, which it would not, Diavolo cannot attack during this 10-second span. Diavolo simply manipulates the time he's able to move freely while everyone else is milling around in his favor. This is great for characters who do not have huge area of effect attacks or without special defense. Having nothing to pierce Gojo's guard, Diavolo using Epitaph would see his end in Gojo's domain 5 seconds in the future. Diavolo uses his Time Erasure to escape this attack, but after a certain point, Diavolo would lose to any number of Gojo's techniques. It would only be a matter of time for Gojo to kill the big boss with Passione. Stands may have infinite stamina, but the wielders do not. Enrico Pucci versus Gojo. So how does Pucci's stand, White Snake, work? White Snake is fairly unique, as it has a one-shot ability by default, and it has 2 separate evolutions that we'll talk about after. Part 1. White Snake. White Snake can take the memories and the stand straight out of his target's skull by touching them. represented as discs. These discs bypass durability as the damage to them affects the target without contact, and the stand discs can be used by people to summon them as their own. This, in theory, could be used to defeat Gojo if it were to touch him, but Gojo cannot be so easily touched. So with this version, Pucci loses. Part 2. Sea Moon. Following the instructions to create heaven, Pucci utters the 14 phrases, and giving Dio's bone to the green baby causes Pucci to fuse with it, sending his stand to a new form, called Sea Moon. Before we can get into Sea Moon's abilities, there's a catch to its very strong powers. Sea Moon is an automatic stand but cannot properly act on its own. It instead operates on orders given to it by Pucci, though there is some degree of a delay. Sea Moon has the ability to manipulate gravity a few different ways: gravity shift and surface inversion. Gravity shift has a 3-kilometer radius, with Pucci in the middle. This treats Pucci as a new center of Earth's gravity, making anyone who is above him fall upwards. This leads to untold casualties, as once they run out of his radius they fall back down again, actually towards Earth this time. This would not work on Gojo, as we already know he can use infinity to walk around, and when it comes to gravity, he doesn't really care about it too much. By touching things, Sea Moon can activate surface inversion, changing the center of gravity of an object, forcing it to violently invert. This could probably hurt Gojo, but like in its earlier form, no contact will be made. In the end, Sea Moon dies to Gojo just the same as regular White Snake. Part 3. Made in Heaven. The ultimate form of White Snake is brought forth with Pucci replicating the specific gravity of the new moon. Made in Heaven has the ability to increase the rate time passes by manipulating the gravity of the Earth and the moon. This rate goes up infinitely but does not affect people outside of Pucci. Pucci is able to bypass the abilities of even Time Stop with this, and if you think that Infinity would have trouble with Time Stop, an ability that surpasses even that would likely be enough to defeat Gojo. In the same way that Dio is said to have immeasurable speed when he really doesn't, Pucci actually does have immeasurable speed in this way, and we see this as he's able to react to Time Stop for whatever reason, and he even is able to do this with Sea Moon, not just Made in Heaven, as we see his eyes move. The same way that Pucci is able to bypass Time Stop is the same way that he would defeat Infinity, by simply just running out someone's ability. Infinity costs a resource, even if just a very, very small amount of one. And as infinite time goes by, Gojo will run out of resources. Even if you say, for the sake of argument, Gojo's Infinity would not run out of a resource, Pucci could simply just throw anything at Gojo, as with infinite acceleration it would bypass Infinity. Why would Pucci even want such a thing? This is to create heaven. Made in Heaven has a higher purpose, by accelerating the passage of time so much that it resets the world, creating the heaven Pucci and Dio so desired. This world contains the same people that were alive before the time reset, though this universe is distinct in a few ways. This point is set at where the part initially started, 4 months ago, where the characters that Pucci killed with Made in Heaven before this reset are now alive again. On top of this, the destiny that played to them to get to this point, including the future that they experienced while time passed with Made in Heaven, is going fast enough to reset the universe. This is shown via something along the lines of premonitions, with their moves already being decided. The basis of this heaven is born from the idea that life with no predestination is the severest form of torture. With this out of the way, people can live their lives to the fullest, knowing full well when their end is coming, this being Pucci's main goal with Made in Heaven all along. Before Pucci can let heaven be, he must remove all in the way of his plan, in this case fighting Emporio. This is really complicated, but it leads to Emporio finding a path to make Pucci push in a disc from before the universe reset that holds his twin brother who hates him to be unmoored by fate, as he was not alive during the universe reset. Gojo would get hit by the universe reset, making him naked. But unfortunately, being naked does not make you immune to a time acceleration, and now fate manipulation as well. Gojo's fate, regardless of the universe, is up in heaven. One last aside, I do know that there is spin-up time to how Made in Heaven works, but simply, Gojo just can't chase Pucci. He's really, really fast, and when Made in Heaven activates, it teleports you 200 meters away for some reason. I don't really know how this is supposed to work, but Gojo is not fast enough to catch Pucci. Funny Valentine versus Gojo is an interesting matchup, as D4C has an infinity of its own in the form of Love Train. Essentially, Love Train is a barrier made up of an infinite number of parallel dimensions, and it directs any misfortune, attacks, bad luck, etc. to another part of the world. This is a much stronger version of Gojo's Infinity and would render any attack useless. Defense-wise, D4C completely overpowers Gojo, and it's the same for offense. There are two ways D4C can kill Gojo, either with Mender Sponge or by teleporting onto him and attacking with his stand. Mender Sponge is what happens when you meet yourself from another dimension, the only exception being Funny Valentine himself. He could bring Gojo from an alternate dimension and the two Gojos would both dissolve into Mender Sponges and disappear. This is because more than one of you cannot exist in the same dimension. Again, the only exception being Funny Valentine himself because of D4C. He also has the ability to teleport anywhere as long as he can smosh himself between two surfaces. He is shown to appear in many places, like a flag, in water, and even through Dio's back. If he's able to teleport anywhere onto Gojo's back, I don't think any Infinity would work. He could also easily be able to get Gojo off guard that way and attack him with his stand. With Love Train as well, any attack on Gojo will prove to be fatal, as D4C is able to redirect the wounds inflicted to any part of the body, bypassing durability. A simple scratch can move from your arm to your heart, or in this case, Gojo's brain. Gojo versus Toru. Toru is a rock human. This means he comes from just about nothing. Even though rock humans are able to intermix with humanity, this is often fated towards disaster. Born by a mother at an extremely small size but rejected at birth, there is no nurture, only nature when it comes to these people. Toru is no exception, with the only concept of a mother he ever knew was a wasp. With his dying moments, he reaches out yearning to that lost memory of a wasp nest. In a deep sense of irony, the hopes and dreams that Toru cruelly mocks humanity for leaving them unfulfilled in death is the only reason he can stand against Gojo. He carries on his will with his stand, Wonder of You. Wonder of You is arguably the strongest stand in JOJOs, depending on who you ask, and it has the abilities to back up such an outstanding title. Before we dive into its abilities, we must understand what the stand is. Now I know you might be thinking, this is obvious, it's a stand, it's the manifestation of the soul. But you'd be incorrect, it's actually a manifestation of calamity. Put simply, calamity is the logic of the universe, as well as the bad fortune of the universe. Wonder of You's ability to control the flow of calamity and cause disasters to opponents. The way the ability activates is if you have the intent to either attack or know more about Wonder of You. This is really bad for Gojo, as just by thinking about attacking, he's already caught in the flow of calamity. Even worse, it is stated that if you see the stand user's face, you will instantly die. The timeline for this fight would be as follows. Gojo thinks about attacking, and then dies due to the flow of calamity. As we see, calamity can be anything, from sudden illness to a plane losing a wing. It can amplify something that would otherwise not be a problem, like when Rai bumps into an umbrella rack and proceeds to break both of his legs. Calamity negates all form of durability, and even if this doesn't include Infinity, Gojo could just simply trip on his own feet and die from the fall. What about domain expansion, you might ask? Well, runs into the same exact problem. To use domain expansion, he has to think of using it first, to put him directly in the path of calamity. Maybe he has finger cramps suddenly and can't bend his fingers to do the hand sign. You might think this is ridiculous, but with how powerful Wonder of You is, it's completely possible. In the end, Toru will be lent a hand by Wonder of You, and with that, he'll take down Satoru Gojo himself. Now this is cheesy, but I really couldn't do this kind of video without you guys. Thank you Flash for helping me realize I was defining Infinity wrong. Thank you for everyone who left a comment, especially the nice and uplifting ones. Thank you to the people in my personal life for supporting me to do YouTube. With this encouragement, I reread the final fights of every main JoJo villain, and I think this has led to my favorite script yet. I always wanted to make great videos, and I was worried that people wouldn't see them. I really mean it when I thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. If you want more than one response per comment or get early info on videos, feel free to join the Discord.